Then I see some walking back, so they'll be here shortly.
And we are live.
We're live, Senate Appropriations, March 18th, fiscal year 26 budget requests. Today we are right now, and we're talking to the Vermont Bond Bank and the Executive Director. So Michael, I'll let you introduce yourself and walk us through your presentation, which we are looking at on our computers.
Great. Michael Gaughan, Executive Director of the Vermont Bond Bank. Thank you all for having me today. Pleasure to be speaking about this item, what's called the Vermont Sustainable Infrastructure Fund that we've been working on in partnership with the Department of Housing and Community Development for a number of months now. So many of you are aware of the bond bank, but for those of you that are not or less familiar, I did include some background information on the bond bank's activities. Increasingly, in what I think is the sort of precondition to this request is we've been partners to the state on some important projects and initiatives, including helping out small water systems through ARPA grant that we received in partnership with Agency of Natural Resources, and then a partnership with the state treasurer and receiving a loan to help with flood impacted communities as well. So this is kind of part and parcel with this expanded partnership we've had. Page, what is this here? Page 4 sort of gets to the heart of the matter, which is how we would envision deploying the Sustainable Infrastructure Fund. I think the questions we've had from day one are, this is a worthy idea, but maybe not a ton of money considering the escalating cost of infrastructure. Our answer to that is that we think it's worth it no matter what if you're helping to enable new units of housing and help those communities stabilize and grow their grand lists. It has merit, but regardless of the amount, I think we have some creative and thoughtful ways in how we'll leverage the funds. And so if it's helpful, I can walk you through the 3 ways in which we see this being deployed and making use of the amount of money that's allocated towards it, or appropriate.
Can you remind us what the governor's recommend was?
Yeah, so the original budget recommendation was 9.1 million. I recently saw a draft of the related legislation that had this at 15 million. And certainly we're supportive, and I believe the administration would be supportive of increasing the amount. So for sake of argument, let's call it 15 million at the moment.
Okay. And would you go through one of the?
Yeah, sure. So there's really 3 ways in which we envision the dollars being used. One is probably the easiest to understand, which is just direct loans. So and those are really, we envision this being for the smaller communities, the smaller projects, where, say the infrastructure need is in the hundreds of thousands or kind of up to $1 million, where, it doesn't make a lot of sense to try and do this through a more complicated structure. We would make a direct loan from the fund to that community. Our target rate on these dollars is 1%. So with 1%, as compared to the bond bank's cost on its conventional program, which is already very low, that produces about $250,000 worth of value. In other words, to pay the same amount on debt service of $1 million at 1%, you would have to contribute $250,000 and be at the same place as if you had a higher rate. So the effective subsidy is $250,000 on a present value basis. If the cost of capital is versus a non-municipal deal, a private cost of capital, that number goes up. So the subsidy implicit in a 1% loan on $1 million is somewhere between $200,000 and $350,000 compared to the next best alternative. So that really matters. That because what that essentially says is that is $250,000 or $200,000 to $350,000 of grant money that you would otherwise need to achieve the same outcome on project feasibility. So that's the first use, and just get into the numbers a little bit there. It's the most straightforward. But given we don't have a ton of money, we want to figure out ways to leverage this and make its impact stretch as far as possible. So another concept we have is that we have our conventional program, we call it the pooled loan program. All of you probably have communities that have used this. And it's primarily something that we use in conjunction with our issuance of bonds, tax-exempt bonds on the marketplace. What we could do in some situations where you have infrastructure to support housing is that we would effectively buy down that rate in our pooled loan program with some dollars from this fund. So let's just say, for instance, it's a $4 million loan to do some type of infrastructure project. We might contribute $1 million from this fund, have the remaining $3 million be through our conventional program, and as a result of that, lower the interest rate somewhere around the amount of 25% to help with project feasibility. And all of these sort of have a bottom line impact on affordability because the sort of project that provides the revenue for the town to pay back, has some flexibility on the amount of property taxes that it needs to pay to support that. Finally, the last application would be that, we're going to have essentially somewhere between $9 and $15 million, maybe more, of equity and a series of repayments on those loans that could be pledged towards other loan facilities where we don't directly take part in the repayment, but we might use the sort of equity inherent in this fund as a backstop or as a credit enhancement for some other type of loan. And this would be really how we'd approach the really big projects and saying, well, maybe they need some amount of credit enhancement to get them over the hump, or to, as a result, get a lower rate. And this is one mechanism by which we think we could do that. So those are the three use cases that we envision with this fund.
What is the TIFIA flexibility, or did you just put it in on your slide that talks about for transit oriented development project?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just one example, and this is a federal loan guarantee program, so who sort of knows where it stands? It's just something that came to mind. A program called TIFIA, which has been around for about 20 years. They changed some of the rules a few years back so that it can be it's for transportation projects, but it's a federal loan guarantee program in what subsequently becomes a direct loan from the feds, but it's quite flexible to be used for transit-oriented development projects. But to participate in that program, you need an investment grade rating on the underlying project. And so while through this fund, we might not participate directly in that loan, we might use it as a form of credit enhancement for projects seeking that source of financing to get them over the hump and be eligible for the program. So I don't know if that's, a real life example or not, but it is one example in terms of how we could see the fund being used to credit enhance loans that don't necessarily impact or that are outside of the direct loans, I suppose.
But the infrastructure, can't remember if there was language around this proposal. We haven't really looked at the governor's draft language yet. If there was language about what's eligible, or if that's to be designed, or there has to be this nexus between infrastructure and housing. Like
that's right.
Wastewater codes.
Yeah, that was the broad parameters on it. There's language around water and wastewater and transportation. And then things that are sort of incidental to those three use categories. The primary need, I think that we're really, we've had prior to this even sort of materializing, we'd given a lot of thought to drinking water improvements, the SR, the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Programs. We manage the financial administration of those in partnership with the Department of Environmental Conservation. And the SRF program is very limited on expanding drinking water systems, which oftentimes is a prerequisite for housing development. So for at least a year, we've been trying to think about sources to fill that gap, which I truly believe to be an infrastructure gap. And we're very pleased by this because it solves a very direct need. Now, if you're going to, tear up the ground and put water infrastructure under the ground, well, you're going to have, you're going to need to do some transportation improvements. And certainly with the state's smart growth priorities, having a complete street network on top of that drinking water is very complementary. And so those are the three, that's why those three things are what we identified. There'll be specific, rules and eligibility criteria we would work out, but those three use cases are identified in the legislation right now.
Okay. And then you have an example type of project. This project in Charlotte happened, right?
Yeah, you've probably seen it before. We've gotten a lot of miles out of this use case. But what I like about it is it just shows how we've taken a couple different sources of funds and put them together in the same project, which is I think what we're going to be doing here. So in the Charlotte example, the town garage had burnt down. They needed to build a new one. We used our pooled loan program, our conventional financing program to finance the vertical project, and then used a special energy efficiency and renewable energy program to finance the solar panels, much like we would do potentially do in this program, where we might use our conventional program to finance a lot of the need and then sort of buy down the cost with this special revolving loan fund. So the point of this example is not that it's apples to apples in terms of the infrastructure, but does give an example of the bond bank's expertise in taking a survey of the sources available and getting the cost of the project down as low as possible for that community.
Great. Are there any questions, Michael, bond bank, about this? So this is just one of the things when we look at the governor one time, this is one of them. So and you know more about it. Well, unless you have anything else for us, Michael, we go let you go.
No, thank you all again. I think we really, to reiterate that point I made about drinking water expansion, we really think this is important to fill a gap that's in the existing infrastructure financing landscape in the state, and we think it has a lot of merit and would be really helpful. So thank you for considering.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Yeah. So Al, is Tanya, would you want to, we could go find her, or you could.
She's right next door. Yeah, sure.
Send an email to, forgot. This is.
We just pop next door.
Or you can pop next door if you want to do that.
And don't forget to come back.
Get lost.
Are you popping over?
Yeah. You don't get a card for getting back first.
There's no popping in appropriations. There's no popping.
Bring all the sad faces up on that chart.
I know, you got it right. Surprisingly.
We're starting over.
It gives you a chance to redeem yourself. What are we doing? S56.
You're skidding on oil. Nice.
Senator, welcome.
Thank you.
We have brought you here today to talk about S56.
Excellent, happy to talk about it.
Okay, what should we know about it?
So S56 sets up a committee to put forward recommendations for standing up an office of new Americans in the state of Vermont. There are many other states, over 20 other states that already have this office. We heard from the person who currently does a lot of the refugee work that in the state of Vermont, that there is a large expansion of need in terms of supporting new Vermonters that is sort of outside of her scope of jurisdiction, and that this office would be important to coordinating supports and services as well as to the economic well-being of the state of Vermont. So this stands up.
With the office, was that Tracy Dolan?
Yes.
Would that office still exist? 'Cause that's,
Yes.
okay, so they would be still
Yes,
full-time.
and Tracy is the chair of this study committee.
Okay.
We went back and forth a lot on the number of people on this committee. I believe we landed at 8. And like I said, Tracy is the chair. It also has representatives from Migrant Justice, AALV, the Afghan Alliance, and then there is the really strange one on the committee is the Brattleboro
gonna ask
Credit
about that.
Corporation.
About that one.
Yes, I asked about it too. And initially there were 2 entities, this Brattleboro Credit Corporation and the World Education Services. World Education Services has worked on these offices all over the country. And the Brattleboro Credit Corporation is doing that kind of work in Vermont, particularly around expansion of workforce development work, expansion of licensure. They've been doing work to help get physicians and teachers licensed from that were trained in other countries. And so they're sort of our Vermont arm of World Education Services. The intent is that those 2 organizations will continue to work together. But the named person is the Brattleboro Credit Corporation because they're sort of that arm of World Education Services. But yes, I too, if you were to look at my notes in the other room, that's highlighted with big capital letters that just says, why? Initially, we had taken them off and put in World Education Services, but what we heard from really both of them was that the named entity should be the Brattleboro Credit Corporation. And they are, like I said, doing this workforce development type of work and are really embedded in that work in the community. The reason, my understanding is the reason that it came here is because there are stipends associated with some of those appointees. And there is language in the bill that looks a little bit out of place around legislative pay. Initially, there was a named senator and a named.
Well, that's what I wondered.
Yeah. So initially, there was a named senator and a named representative in the bill. We took those out in order to shrink the committee from a 15-member committee to this current 8-member committee. But we left that language in because there's nothing precluding those appointments that are in the bill from being a legislator. So there are not currently any legislators on the study committee, but that doesn't mean someone couldn't get named to that committee.
Okay.
And so that's really the appropriation pieces is the stipends and reimbursement for people who might be appointed to the committee in a capacity that isn't paid for within their job, or if a legislator were to be appointed. But many of the people like Tracy Dolan, that would be part of her job. So there's a lot of the people on there that likely it would be a part of their existing paid job.
Right. So they wouldn't get it, and they're limited to 10 meetings.
Yes, they are limited to 10 meetings. The initial bill was 20. A lot of this work has been kind of ongoing and happening. And so we did hear that they thought 10 could be enough. And I also, if for some reason they're not, the report is not due until September 1st, 2026. So they can certainly come back to us next year and ask for additional meetings.
Okay. And so at one point, somebody described this as taking the work of the Tracy Dolan's Rose of the Refugee Alliance. What are they called? No, there's a Vermont Afghan Alliance. Then there's Tracy Dolan's group, the refugee.
So the Vermont Refugee Office.
And then there's some other groups, and they were going to kind of combine them all, but that's not what's happening. They're just kind of studying about all the issues.
So the task of this group is to define New American for us in the context of the work that we're doing and put forward recommendations for how to stand up an Office of New Americans. And so it would encompass Tracy Dolan's work, but what we heard from Tracy and from many others that were supportive of this is that there's a lot of work that people are doing or trying to do that fall outside of the realm of her current work. You know, things like, and OPR is named as someone to consult with, or not OPR, the Secretary of State's office is named as someone to consult with, because there are places where people are not seeking refugee services because they're a citizen now, but they don't have the tools to navigate getting relicensed. And so they need additional help with support there, or they need more culturally relevant support to stand up a business. And so what we heard is like, Tracy's work is critically important and doesn't go away, but there's a lot of work that it doesn't encompass that would help people navigate our systems better. And what we heard over and over and over again was the importance to our economy and the importance that our new American community members bring to the growth of economy in Vermont.
Okay, any questions? Senator? And Mr. Devlin, there is not a fiscal note on this, I would assume, because it's a very tiny amount of money.
So Chris did write one.
Okay.
There is one. I just put it up about an hour ago.
Approved it. So I'm assuming it's $4,000 or
Yeah.
something like that.
I would imagine that it is de
$200?
minimis.
Oh,
Oh,
6,200.
here it is.
Okay, because it would only gonna be a portion of these 8, and then it's only gonna be for the maximum 10 meetings.
Yes, I was actually surprised it even came to this committee because I mean, once I thought about it, it clicked, but I was like, it's such a de minimis, like, I didn't even think about the money.
Right.
So
Caroline?
I'm looking at the fiscal note. This isn't your problem, it's our problem. It says, if a legislator is appointed to the committee, the cost would be approximately $250 per legislator per meeting. Seems like a lot. Is that what we get paid?
I thought we just got the per diem. and
I know,
not the-
I'm trying to sort that out.
Isn't the per
You get your
diem?
mileage per diem and $10 for lunch.
Yeah,
That's it.
Meals.
Is that $250?
I don't think
I
so.
don't think so. Okay, it's not your problem.
Yeah, because I don't know what the per diem is. I thought the per diem was like, well, last time I looked at it,
$50?
$55.
Yeah.
Well, so the legislative per diem is 1/4 of our daily rate of pay, so it's like 170 something
It's
plus.
different.
The stipend for people who are attending and not paid is $50
Okay, so
plus expenses. Legislators are more expensive.
I see. So they get these reimbursement of expenses. They get compensation, they get per diem.
Not 200.
So when it's somebody not in the legislature and they get per diem, it's the $55?
Yes, so if it's someone who's appointed, say it's
I guess I'd look up 32 VSA. 10.
John
Mhm.
Smith from
Yeah.
Burlington, who's appointed by the governor to represent AALV. And that's not part of his job. He would then get the $50
Okay.
stipend plus mileage and expenses. The people like Tracy Dolan, there would be no additional expense because that's part of her job. And then legislators get the 1/4 of their weekly rate of pay.
Okay, any questions? Okay, great.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
This committee, too.
Only the chair gets that. on this committee.
If anybody wants to make a motion, we could move.
I move the bill favorably.
Okay. We have to take a vote.
Can we resolve the $250 issue?
Are we gonna,
What's there to be resolved?
Well, it's
It's
not-
124 for the per diem. We figure $10 from the other, 134. In my case, I get $94 in mileage down and back. So I got 134, 200, I think they just use the approximate $250 in fact.
Okay, I'll take it.
So what's the per diem, 100 and what?
124.
124.
Okay.
So they're lumping it all in together.
Yeah,
is this one of those that we're
Meals,
gonna
mileage.
take the money out of the
I
bill?
never put it to the meal.
There's no money, there's no appropriation in the bill. I guess we could take out the per diems, but given that it's
I think
about
we're fine.
$5,000.
I move the bill.
Okay.
If the clerk
So
could
is there any
get busy,
Is there any discussion?
I'm thinking, but
if the clerk could get busy.
This is just a study now, right?
It's a study, no more than 10 meetings, 8 members. Some of them are already doing this work, so they won't get the per diem. And they have a report back.
I have to vote. Or, me or her?
Like me?
Me?
Rich.
I need
Take a
to,
vote
I need
first.
to
Okay.
vote.
all right,
Call Richie first.
all right. We will start with Senator Westman.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I assume he's a reporter since he moved.
Yeah.
Okay. He didn't get that. Senator Norris.
Did you say me?
Yes, I did.
I'm sorry. As long as it's a study, I'll say yes. want to see the results of the report's not coming back to us, but.
Senator Watson,
Yes.
Senator Baruch. How many hold it?
If we see him later, before.
Senator Lyons,
Yes.
Senator Brennan, yes, Senator Perchlik.
Yes.
Okay.
The meeting starts September 1st and, we have to do the,
It goes by September 26, 2026. September 1, 2026.
So we get a whole year, basically. And if we see Senator Bruce before Melissa comes down to get the bill, then we can let him vote, but it matters.
Okay.
Otherwise. Okay. We're making good time, so we can go on break.
Maybe I'll take a walk.